So Cubans, they are so fun. They are very, very, very different, and they're very hard to understand. Their Spanish is really different. They leave off a lot of their S's and mix up their R's and their L's, and so it's a little, like, even at the end of my mission, I was still a little, okay, I think I got what they were saying. But they're very loving and kind-hearted and very warm people, and they're just very fun. Cubans, I guess Cuban was under communist rule, and so they, coming over here is pretty hard. They come by boat, and it's really dangerous, and a lot of them don't survive it. And so many of the people that are in Kentucky are waiting to hear from family and just focus on their families back home, because they get here without their families, and then they have to try to make their way to eventually get them here, and it's really hard. A lot of them struggle, but they are very faithful, and they're very open to the gospel, just because they don't hear it back in Cuba. And so when they hear it for the first time here, it's just soaking it in and just hearing it for the first time, and they really latch onto it, and they're just very, very wonderful, just very kind-hearted people. And so Cubans, you'll have a lot of fun with them out there on the mission. And they're mostly concentrated there in Louisville. There are some in Lexington, and we actually taught and baptized one in my first area in Corden. But they're wonderful people. I really enjoy being around them. There's only a few select religions in Cuba, and so a lot of them are either, I've already heard what they've had to say, or just not religious at all, but they do have a faith in God and in Christ. And so getting over here is really hard. They come by boat, like I said, and they pack quite a few of them on there, and it's really dangerous because they eventually land in Florida, and as soon as they hit American soil, they get their citizenship, kind of a thing, and then they get put into refugee programs to help them. It's kind of hard being in the refugee program in Louisville. From what I understood, I don't have all the facts, of course, but from what I understood, they go through this program where they teach them English, a little bit of English, and so they're learning that, and then they get put in some classes to help them know how to work and get a job and things like that. They'll pay for their rent in these apartments for the first, I believe, 6 months, and then if they don't, the struggle is if they don't get a job straight out of the program, they're kind of out of luck. In Cuba, they don't pay a monthly rent. They buy their house once, and then that's it. But here, by renting an apartment, it's expensive, and what we consider a cheap apartment isn't very cheap for them, especially when they can't find a job. And so they're all stuck in some pretty hard circumstances. But I met a few who really stuck to it. I knew one lady in when I served in Louisville. She came here from Cuba and everything. She learned English. She was a English as a second language teacher. She was getting her master's. She always spoke to us in English, and it just always shocked us because she's amazing. She was a great member, and she had a great personality, and she was just she stuck to it. And so it was cool to see their examples, the ones who really stuck to it and really stuck with the gospel and really latched onto it. So they're really cool examples. Some of them are there with family. Some of them are just there by themselves waiting for their family. It's kind of hard. You'll run into that a lot in the missions, and it's not just from Cubans. You'll run into a lot of split up families and men who are here without their families and stuff. And it's hard. A lot of them get into some pretty rough circumstances, and drinking is a big problem and things like that. That's mostly what you'll run into. But jobs that they had, it typically, if you were in the city, it ranged from fast food restaurants to working in stores or factories. A lot of them was factory work. I know there's like a meat factory there in Louisville that a lot of them worked at. It depends on what side of the mission you're on. If you're in Paris and Lexington, a lot of them work in the horse farms. So it's really cool to hear their stories. They're just really devoted. They're very, very, very hardworking people. That's another aspect about them. They get the concept of hard work, and they'll work, and it's kind of frustrating because you want to get them to church on Sundays, but they're so focused on working and saving their money and being able to provide for their families that they, sometimes let that take over. But they're just very hardworking, loving people, and they're great.